All right, we are back. Again, we are here with Chris. We're going to talk about where we left off. We're going to continue on his journey, and we have reached to Latvia. People who have been listening, and we're going to uncover some new aspects about training, being a soldier, being an instructor, and about life. So, hey Chris.
Hi Remo, good to see you again on this rather sunny but cold.
Yeah, it's -0 here in Tartu.
It actually can lead me into a point straight away. When the first time I left Latvia was to go on Easter leave, and that was in August. No, that was in April, early April, 1995, and that would have been about the time where we'd settled in. We've now got our own accommodation near the camp, and the accommodation is easily recognisable to the audience here, because it is just your normal prefabricated Soviet Army flat apartment block, which I've seen everywhere. They're standardised. The only good thing about it was it had been refurbished. Although, as I said, as this is quite conversational, every time I talk, it can lead on to something else, because the reason we moved into it before it was completed was because we found that when people had signed up to do things, they never did it. And it only required the pressure of forcing the issue made it happen. So when we actually moved into that apartment block, they'd actually only accomplished the apartments that the team was going to live in. And the rest was what we call Beirut, which because Beirut was the big thing then, where it had been bombed and destroyed. So the rest of the building was Beirut. But there was a phenomenon which I started to notice, which I'd never seen in the West. And that was it. All the workmen are drunk. And one of the reasons why things are seen is movement. And one day I noticed, and I could see empty bottles flying out of these windowless openings of the apartment block that they were trying to refurbish. And I just thought, okay. And then over time, I noticed that there was a big pile of bottles at the bottom of the building, and some things are just beyond your imagination, so you can't actually take it in, you know, when you're used to a certain code of behaviour, let's say. And they were actually empty vodka bottles, and I started to put it together, because the workmen actually did eat in the army camp, and at dinner time I saw the workmen actually carry a worker to the kitchen. And even then I thought, oh, he must be tired, and then I thought, no, he's drunk. And I started to realise that one of the old work practices that were still in place from that Soviet period, that a lot of workers actually drank all day. And on Friday when I used to do my daily run, that was the worst in the afternoon, because yet again Friday is in any country, including Britain, or used to be, the workers, you know, you get paid and maybe you have a few beers at the end of work. But what illustrated it perfectly was, and I was amazed, so I'm running, you know, and I saw a guy on his bicycle, and he was in the perfect bicycling position with his feet on the pedals, except he was laying down on the pavement, because he was obviously driving his bicycle and suddenly just collapsed. But it's actually like his body froze in position. And I have to admit, you know, these things then were quite fascinating. I found it fascinating. I thought, wow. And later on, in my time here. When I went to Paldiski, and I was actually asked a very serious question once by a lady who was actually part of the, as she termed it herself. She said to me, "We were the Soviet aristocracy," which I actually also found quite strange, because I thought the Soviet Union didn't have an aristocracy. I thought it was workers of the world unite. But she said that the Soviet naval officers were actually the aristocracy of that regime. Well, which I do understand. But she said to me, "Do you have a problem? Do people drink at work?" She didn't quite phrase it that way, but that's what she meant. And I said no. No. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't imagine a world where people at work were not pissed. Yeah, as in drunk.
It comes from the if you're working for the government, then there was this kind of, actually in the Soviet Union time, there was like this working in farms. So they had a group of I don't know how it's in English.
Like a collective.
Something like that. And then those were pretty decentralized in reality, and a lot of shit got done because it was decentralized. But people were still like, the currency was vodka.
Yeah.
And they were like paying in drinking and stuff like that. That was the currency. And then the tractor drivers who were like, I don't know, doing the agriculture on the fields, like up until, I would say, in 90s, when we still had the Belarus tractors, the old Russian ones, the blue ones that you saw everywhere, like T40 and T80 or whatever the names of those tractors were. Those all the time we said that it had even this kind of driver's seat, and we said it's a drunksman seat because two dudes could sit there in there, and there's also like two guys drinking vodka and I don't know, doing agriculture or stuff on the fields. That was the norm.
Yeah, it was.
Everyone was just drinking.
And I answered to this woman, this lady, because I had a lot of time for her, because she was very well educated, and she's the person who I met in Paldiski on day one, and she actually taught me to ask for something in the shop, and she was actually an English teacher. She couldn't comprehend the fact that you could have a society that wasn't drunk at work.
Yeah.
And I said to her, look, if a guy turned up at work drunk, he'd be sent home, and if he's lucky, he might keep his job. But if he was at work drinking, especially neat spirit, I said he'd just be absolutely dismissed. It's just you don't have that. So that
it was part of the culture.
It was and I thought a very dangerous culture, because when I did visit Russia in the early days, I used to play a little game, which was do a 360 and see if, when you do a 360, can you see, can it be with nobody identified having a drink? And it is very hard to accomplish that. This is in the street, people drinking a beer, drinking out of those plastic cups, and it was like, wow! I couldn't find a situation where there wasn't someone drinking. It's very dangerous, and
this was the Soviet era antidepressant.
Yeah, I mean, I know in the mornings they could go to machines and actually get those plastic cups with a 100,
like yogurt.
Yeah, like a yogurt cup, and it's just peel off and drink to start vodka. The day, and
starter package.
I got told actually it's good to keep the cold out, which it's not actually. If it's in properly cold conditions, it actually helps what heat you have got to dissipate, so it can be very dangerous. Yeah, so there's all these sort of new cultural things which were at beyond belief. And I sort of can use that for many contexts, because as I started to finish that last episode, because in some ways you're naive, and I've used the term mirror image before, because whilst it was quite hard to envisage what it would be like in the former Soviet Union, whereas anywhere else I'd been to in the world, you just knew what it was going to be like. It was not only not having a mental image, so you actually fill it in by associating it with things that you understand, and it goes also to what I've mentioned before about when I've started to learn the other side and try to explain it to the British Army in the early days when I did meet them occasionally. I would, and I have to admit, I was actually in a way asking for a little bit of a shoulder to cry on. I'll be honest, I didn't get it, and they didn't. They thought I was mad because they couldn't understand what I was talking. They could not associate with what I was talking about because they were still stuck in their British Army bubble, and they couldn't imagine. They couldn't imagine it could be like that.
It's crazy.
They couldn't imagine it. So that's actually used the word crazy because I used to describe it as the craziness. I say, look, it's the craziness. And on my Estonian friends, we worked together. They also would understand that, and they could, they saw both sides now. So I termed it the craziness, and you don't fight it; you just try and accept it for what it is. So when I finished that last episode, I actually started to realise that how good these guys were. Because at that time, they were sergeants and officers. And I didn't know about conscripts. I didn't know about the weaknesses. And even if it had been the most or the best training in the world, after that short period of time you're a sergeant or officer, it'd have been, whoa, and still with limited experience. So the penny dropped as I was talking about this, because they were sergeants, so they automatically had a certain respect from me because they're sergeants. Also, I was saying that I do like to think I give respect to anybody regardless of rank, but you certainly expected something from them, which we did get. The only thing I thought would be different is, of course, what they'd been taught, or what they may know, may be different. And that wasn't an issue because it was our way or no way. It's very simple then. It was our platform, and you're going to do what we want. End of story. So there was still that bubble to fall back on. We're going by our rules, and it's been signed up to. So there was no friction there. Although, as I did mention once, initially, and I call it breaking the horse because I've actually had to do this 1,000 times. Because they think they know everything, and I sent you that little dit from John Cleese who summed it up, about people who know nothing think they know everything. This syndrome. People who've got a good understanding and knowledge understand and accept they've got weaknesses in what they don't know because they've got a measurement. They know how far they are. And they can, even if you're really good, you can accept there's some things I don't know or some things I've forgotten, and what is better than you. You could accept that, and you can. It's not about being humble. It's just a calculation. You know that, and as it also says, maybe when you're really good, you don't even understand it.
Yeah.
You think it's just normal, and you also then think everybody else is the same, and that's another sort of. Is comparable to this mirror image which I expected because I'm this at my level, at my rank. I expect other people to be that way, and it's not only the Baltic guys. I also had some bridges to cross with a lot of other armies that I met. That expectations that I expected I did not receive or see, and we'll talk about that later.
I agree.
So
I've seen it. Seen it the same way.
Yeah. So I was a bit. And I've only sort of put these pieces. I always just term the jigsaw because everything has been so fragmented over so many years, which at sometimes I couldn't understand, and now I do. I think I do now. So perhaps it's not so much of the craziness, and some of the weaknesses I saw in the Baltics were not just in the Baltics. I've seen it everywhere, including the British. We have weaknesses.
So yeah, if you put together the actual culture, where they come from, where they were risen, because it was 40 years of occupation, right? And it was, so they were all raised up in that area where that was the culture mindset, which you can imagine. Then you put there a human tendencies that every human has, and then eventually you get those dudes in that training. So that's kind of provides a pretty interesting like sauce where those guys are put together with their cultural background, with they just got free. Now they have this ego because they are smarter than some of the people. And now you get those dudes on a field with actual people who have been grown up in a Western military, who has a traditions, who has systems, who have SOPs, who has a very standardized way how to grow people. And now those two things meet first time somewhere in Latvia.
Yeah. As I said, the reason why this horse, let's just say this horse was easier to control, was because one, we had a fairly good sized team, and secondly, it had been signed for under a memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
And we very quickly broke the horse, and they understood we don't know much, if anything, and they just accepted it. But as I found out later, even more than accepting it, which is very good, they enjoyed it. It was hard work, but the feedback I got, in fact, many years later, was it was the best. For many people, they said it was the best part of their service career, and they thoroughly enjoyed it because every week they learned something. And I know it's a training model that is proven it, which we use, and I always try to do it if I'm writing a training program, if possible, is that on Monday when you teach something, by Friday you've accomplished something, and they can see it and they can feel it. And Wednesday is the time when they've made mistakes and they correct their mistakes and they were pretty bad, but now both sides can see some progression. And on Friday, they've got a result. That's not always possible, but often I found it is. And of course, during that week, it's been pretty tough. And it being pretty tough is not a problem, because you know what? Soldiers like it tough if they're learning something, and they actually they go away feeling that was tough. But I was big enough, I was strong enough, I was man enough to do it, and it's a sense of pride. And that is matched with a result. Of course, if it's just making them pick up rocks for a week, which is back-breaking, and there's nothing, and they know nothing's been achieved. Of course, on Friday they're just as pissed off as they were on Monday. And they got nothing to look forward to on Monday except the same gross indecencies. So that's why Mondays sometimes aren't always the best, because you're starting, if you write your program properly, something new, and you progress. And that's certainly the way I like to do business. So you finish something, you finish it on Friday, and it's really hard, but they actually do quite well, And they're happy, I'm happy, but for the right, this is it, we're happy for the right reason. We're not playing the you're happy, I'm happy, we're happy sweet game just for our own egos. We both can see improvement, and we certainly saw that every Friday, and I was very pleased with the Estonian guys. They did very well, and I fully appreciate that now, even more so, understanding that they were quite young, very inexperienced. They had a poor background, which was not their fault, and also they did it with a minimal understanding of the English language. But I would say, though, that's why it proves that explanation, demonstration, imitation, and practice in this, we could call it a very simple training tool or ladder to use. But I always find if you always do that, you can't go wrong.
Explanation, demonstration, imitation,
and imitation, practice, and progressive practice. and that progressive practice can go on for 20 years, whatever. It's infinite. But it has to be progressive, not just repeating the same thing. It's progressive. It's getting harder, and you're building up what was originally taught. And of course, you know, practice is just to maintain a standard. So that's really where I was when I finished talking on the last episode, because I suddenly realised they were brilliant. And I actually did, when I did meet a training major in Royal Marine's headquarters in Portsmouth, I actually tried, and this is actually going forward when I was actually also working within the Estonian army and explaining what we were doing, and he actually virtually laughed at me and said, "You can't do that." And I said to him, "Boss, I had no alternative, and I did do it, and I don't know how I did it, but I did it, you know." So I couldn't, and that was actually, you know, going on. That was another frustration. I suppose.
So what was the thing? What was the thing that he said it's impossible to do?
Well, because, you know, I'm talking about all the things that I trained so many people to do on my own, and he said, "Well, you can't do that."
In which way?
Well, because we would have a training team of 20 people.
Oh, okay. So you can't do it alone.
And it'd have a longer time to do it, because you know, if they're training officers, they take 12 months with this massive team for a very small amount of people.
Yeah, got it.
So he couldn't, and that goes back to the mirror images. Now, did I do it to the same standard? No, that's impossible. But I got pretty close.
Yeah.
Because I know once you get pretty close, or even if you get halfway, you built a platform that if you do get more people in, you can build it very quickly. And even if it's been forgotten to an extent, you can build it, because once you've taught it properly, it's there. It just needs to be forced back to the surface. So yeah, and when I get onto the battle school, even I will look at. Well, I've said to myself, "No, I don't know how I did it. I don't." But it's amazing what you can do with good people, when you have no other opportunity except either give up and say, "I'm not going to do it. It's not possible." And that was actually on the table, because my boss, this major, said to me, "If you think it's an untenable situation, you just pick up the phone. I'll get you a ticket and you're out of there." Because bearing in mind, when I got sent to Estonia to be part of the army on loan service, there were no terms. It was just get out there. We'll get onto that in the future, but I think there were some of the things that are worth noting. So these guys have done incredibly well. I fully recognise that now. We've done the individual training, and it's not always just, you know, individual, squad, troop. They use a mix and match. You haven't always got to stick to that, but there was an element of truth on it. You can't go on to section battle drills if you can't fire manoeuvre, if you can't indicate targets, if you can't give fire control orders, if you can't change formations, etc., etc. So we then got on to squad training, and that actually then brings out and practices also within that training all the individual skills you've taught. So it's not just individual skills taught forgotten, it's individual skills still practiced within the squad, because those are part of it. It's just like with troop drills, there's still individual and squad drills within that platform. So it's not done forgotten, it's now done and practiced within a different format. And there's other things that have to be done at troop level. So it's always consistently practicing.
By reinforcing the old things.
Yeah, it's so one of the mistakes that can be made, and I often do see, is because you've taught individual skills, you go on to squad skills, and then people ignore poor individual training within the squad. So you have to keep on top of that as well. I know I certainly did, and my guys did. So when we did squad training, what does that encompass? Well, we'd always start normally on section battle drills, because when we come on the patrolling phase, we teach ambushes. So in the American parlance, direct action. So we're teaching, it can be a small unit deliberate attack, ambushing, reconnaissance, observation patrols, standing patrols, and of course the sequence we teach that in is normally reconnaissance patrol, and that's one of the easiest formats. So we walk a bit, or as we say, eat a bit, shit a bit. So we do perhaps recce patrols, a fighting patrol, an ambush, and within that there's also all the actions on. The actions on are very important. Actions on, so what happens if this happens? Because, you know, it is a drill, but also it's a practice way to react as a group. Especially, you know, you're going to be doing this perhaps at night or in thick vegetation, and you can't stop to discuss how you're going to do it. For example, you see the enemy, actions on, and you're going to give orders, depending on the situation, what you're going to do. Are you going to attack? Are you going to withdraw? Are you going to stop? Are you going to listen? Are you going to continue? And there's a smorgasbord of actions that you can do for that, depending on what your mission and task is. Normally, for example, if you're doing a recce patrol, if you see the enemy, it's observe, note and report. But of course, if your recce patrol was to reconnaissance an ambush site to kill General B, if I was on a reconnaissance and I saw General B, well, I would probably make a plan that if I did see that person, I'd kill him then if the opportunity arose, because the aim of the recce patrol is to establish an ambush to kill that person. So that's why we also give mission and task, and also the future intention of that, you know, why you're doing it. So so within that also we teach the orders process, and I would say one of the hardest, I'm not using the word hardest, the more detailed orders we give are going to be for the ambush, actually. So
why is that?
So
because it has so many multiple moving parts,
and you've got to be quiet and all the rest of it. Every man must know what they're going to do, because in an ambush in particular, if you make a mistake and you get seen, or you're in the wrong place, well, you're very vulnerable, and it can be turned around where you're now the prey. So the ambushes normally we do last, because they're the more detailed and also require, they're a combination of all the individual skills in its essence, especially when it's done at night, and normally they are, or at least you're gonna occupy it at night. Yet again, can be done in the day, but you know, yet again, as you know yourself, there's all the different connotations. But we certainly teach all these things to be done at night, because it's also the hardest way to do it. So one of the things that I recognise now, which I didn't fully understand then, is that we did everything at night, and I took that as completely normal. And I'm actually...
You mean in Britain, right? Or in Marines?
In Britain and the Royal Marines in particular, we were very into our night work, very much into it. I mean, everything. Which
is pretty crazy to me, like, because like you didn't have any night vision, you didn't have any of those things, and to remain silent, to approach. I mean, obviously it depends on the thickness and the area and shit like that. There's almost, regardless, if you have those night visions in Estonian forest, in many occasions, you can choose an area where there is almost impossible to get close without making a hell lot of noise. And in many times, what the teams fail is that they will rather not go from a road. They will go into the thick bush. They make so much noise. Actually, they are all compromised in first 30 minutes. But we went in the right. Yeah, but if you're compromised, it's pointless to go from there.
Well, ambushing, if you're compromising an ambush,
Yeah.
I mean, you're just waiting to be taken out.
Yeah, it's mainly like what I was actually particularly saying about the raids, right? It's if you putting your positions in a thick forest, in a thick brush there, and you're making so much noise that enemies all waken up and actually on their positions. It will be a very sad raid.
Yeah, well, at night you are normally heard before you're seen,
Yeah.
and in daylight you are seen before you're heard. That's the simple rule, and it normally is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you are, that's why. In any thick vegetation area, and you could say in most environments, you are going to make some noise if you don't patrol properly, and that is why just the simple act of moving one foot in front of another is actually a very detailed thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, if the and I quite like that thing you brought up, because that would actually bring out so many basic individual skills.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong in training, in choosing a really horrible piece of ground to cross to practice these skills. And it's why I know we in particular always were very strict in teaching the individual skills, and always not allowing any infractions. And if you see a mistake, you're on top of it. For sure, though, if you're going to make noise, well, you have to make the decision how the enemy operate. Would you have a chance of getting close to them with some sort of noise, or is there some sort of distraction that it could be used? That's possible. But even in quite difficult positions, you can get quite close if you use individual skills correctly.
Mm-hmm. But it's also like in training scenarios. Is also another layer of it is that the enemy most of the time knows that you're coming, and they are just looking and hearing for those small in many bad scenarios or bad training scenarios where it's not set up properly.
Why I think making a plan in real time is easier making a plan in training is in training normally you get the worst case scenario. But
yep.
In real time the enemy also make mistakes, and you make your plan depending on the enemy's situation, which is their habits, their routines, good and bad, and that's going to give you the solution, if done correctly, to fulfill your task. Or you can say that won't work. But also there's that other friction of war, which I found out. If the task has to be completed, there's an element of, you might die doing it, tough, get on with it. And that fighting patrol that I talked about was a classic example of breaking every rule in the book. I've joked with Steve, that guy I took the map from.
Yeah.
I've joked with him so many times that if we'd done that in training, we'd have been demoted. Plan, fail. You would have all died, fail. You can't be a leader, fail. But we were successful.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an element of luck and bad luck to anything, but I also find that good training does within itself bring good luck. I think the reason we got away with that at Fighting Patrol was one, we were well trained, and two, the enemy because of their patrol routines and habits were quite poor, failed to recognise who we were, and we took advantage of that. Because the individual skills were poor and the sentry did not behave properly and alert other people, he allowed us to come so close to them that we were a very efficient and aggressive force at close quarters with only 2 sections, which was 12 men plus 3, against a battalion dug in defence. Because a lot of the in-depth positions couldn't actually lower their weapon systems onto us without hitting their own men, which then gave us a great advantage where they were shooting quite wildly, thinking obviously they were giving us good smashing, and in fact, fortunately, a lot of it was ineffectual over our heads. But yet again, over our heads. But if we'd got up or made the wrong movement, you would have been taken out. So we say, you know, take liberties at a longer range, and then they decrease as you get closer. But certainly with good fieldcraft skills will hopefully negate some of these frictions like noise, etc. But I love it because it's really going to bring out those individual skills.
Yeah, and to me, I think that the main point in all of this is that we can only control things what we can control, and training is one of the main things that we can control. Yeah. And if you are doing a great training, like that's what we were like. That's what the SEALs had the saying on their door, or the unit that we work with. They had a on their talk or their team room. They had this every day where you're not giving 100%, your enemy is happy.
Yeah,
that was their like motivational thing, right? And then eventually, it's like only thing what we can do here in Estonia is train properly, because in Afghanistan they have the terrain, they have the other features which we are not able to control. But that's the only thing what we can control. And we can train better, we can train more, we can be smarter. At least we have, I don't know, 7 out of 10 training. They might be 2 out of 10 in terms of their preparation. Then there is this environment. Afghanistan is a hard environment. It's 10 out of 10, which makes them an enemy of 12 out of 20. Now, if we are able to get 7 and we are not able to, it will be difficult for them to fight as well. So we are able to increase our level to 17 out of 20, which provides us the advantage eventually. It will be a hard one, but that's in my opinion that's one of the main things what we can control, and the things we can't control, we can't control anyways.
Yeah.
So
and you have to accept that. And but I would say that if it's amazing what you can do when you have to, but it does require vigorous training and a bit of luck.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, if it's really such bad terrain, well, maybe the last 100 meters you've got to do it on your belly.
Yeah.
It may be that as you take a meter, you've got to move some twigs and sticks out of your way. And it's a nightmare, but you've got to do it. And that 100 meters might take you 6 hours. Getting back to the statement you just made, I totally agree with it, 1,000%. You can't, and we said before, Rommel said, and other generals have said in different ways, that training is the best form of welfare you can give your men in peacetime.
Mm-hmm.
And they've also, you know, they've also talked about something we talked about. On Fridays, you train that hard, you actually feel good about it, and they're not crushed by it. They actually enjoy the fact that they've been pushed all week, but they've achieved something. That's very important. My own personal observations after working with the Estonians in particular is they're very quick learners and magnificent soldiers when they've been trained.
Mm-hmm.
More so than, I'm going to say it, I've trained quite a few people from different countries. They are without a doubt the most outstanding. And one of the things that I've noticed is that they can learn very quickly, which also maybe helps to understand why my boss in England said you can't do that. Well, I did, because they do learn quickly, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So as we go on later, one of my frustrations is when you got the time, but you don't produce the training platform to use this great product to be molded into the machine it can be made. Because certainly in the early days you didn't have the equipment, but you had the manpower, and the people, the individual person, is the most important part of your war machine. And many countries, many armies fail to understand this. Now fortunately the guys on the other side, they're still a bit, I think, Soviet in their mindset, with not caring too much about loss of life and all the rest of it.
If they had that mindset, it would be a game over.
But I think due to recent events, they're beginning to change their tune, and they've actually learned from their mistakes, which also goes back to what I was taught or told many years ago, was that it's okay if we lose 50%, we learn quickly. Now, some countries can get away with that because their population is so big. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that anyway, because that's just ridiculous. You know.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous from a concept of producing any product, human or whatever. That's a ridiculous mindset to have. And, you know, I look on the army or the military as it's a business. It's a business. Why are you prepared, because you can run a poor business because of government funding, that you're only forced to improve it when you've got customers, let's say?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So it was always a frustration with such great manpower that there wasn't a coherent system for everybody to maximise that, because you've got a great product to be easily moulded into a fantastic army. I'm not saying it's not at the moment, but I'm saying that you should always aim to be at the optimum level.
Highest standard.
You know, the highest you can get in when you've got time to do it, and I still think you have got time to do it.
Absolutely.
And even if you haven't got time, you got today, you got tomorrow, which becomes
what's
today,
the alternative?
and you just keep on going. You keep on doing it. Don't give yourself the excuse, oh, it's too late, we can't do it. Because actually that's what I was told 20, 30 years ago. Oh, they could be coming back tomorrow, you know. Just don't allow that to affect your mentality, because I did feel that part of it was just an excuse not to focus on what was a very difficult problem.
Well, it's always the easiest solution is to say that, hey, I'm a victim and I can't do anything. I was abused for 30 years by the Soviet system, and it's always the easiest way out, where you don't have to do anything and you can crawl into a ball and be there and get other people's appreciation, but you will not.
Which actually also led to something else which I noticed in those days, that, and it goes back to, you know, for example, I said nothing was done by the countries we moved to. They'd signed up to an agreement, but they don't do anything until it's that day. So I think there was a mentality of, we've got to survive today with today's problem, and when we get the new problem today, we deal with it. And our problem with, say, for example, the infrastructure, the place to live, not only for us but the people we're training, only became the problem on the day. And I saw that many times. And I certainly for quite a few years in my early days in a different uniform, that attitude was still there. And that's why I could never get people to focus on the putting the effort into getting things done properly as a systematic approach, rather than a make it up as you go along and hopefully we can fix it on the day. Which I accept in you could say a wartime battle, where you've now got a completely different scenario, and you've just got to quickly get guys together and deal with it. I accept that, but that's obviously with well-trained people, which make it hopefully doable. But certainly you are, and certainly we try and teach that once you've been trained to a high standard, you're going to be flexible. That when you get a new problem, you can deal with it and make decisions quickly. But that's based on previous logical training, where you learn to walk, learn to run faster, and you get given time. We've always been given tasks that were quite immediate and gave you very little time to plan, which put you under great pressure, and also with very little sleep. And I think I mentioned this once before, and when I was younger, I did talk to somebody later in my position, and they said, well, we can't shoot at you, but we can make you very tired, and we can give you a task which we expect a good result from, especially when they come to training leaders. Because on command courses, you are given a task that is outrageous in the time frame when you've got to plan and execute it. But that's to put you under pressure. And I've got no problem with that. And that's why, going back to the other comment I made, that in war, sometimes things are a lot easier, because you do get the time. Hopefully, you do get all the resources, and you get as much information also from the other agencies that you normally wouldn't get in training, which make life a lot easier. But then, of course, you can die doing it. That's the yin and yang of life.
I also was thinking, like, that's what the system produces, like the Soviet system particularly. What I wrote down is that it eventually, like, you are generating people through not allowing them to think. You tell them this is how you do things. You eventually kind of break their soul, break their will, want to even do anything. And that's why there is no initiative, because there's no point. You can't change this system, me individually. And that's the kind of, I would say, the brilliant part about that system, because that's why it can last, and that's why the dictatorship can last, because you have broken down the will, and you have done it so well from a dictator's perspective that there is no people, or there is not enough people who are capable of, they don't have the will anymore. They're just slaves. They don't care. And because that's why they think only one day at a time. There's no point in thinking 1 week at a time, because tomorrow might be a boss coming in and take me away. So what's the point?
Yeah, I do get that, actually. One of the, in fact, this guy was the sergeant major of the first group we had. Great guy, and he'd been in the Soviet army, and he had been in Afghanistan a few times. So I think he was probably at least maybe a senior sergeant in the Soviet army. And I have to admit, I found this, I think infuriating is too strong a word, but I like feedback. I like feedback, and I like honesty. So, for example, if you think I've done something, if you think I've said something wrong, even though I'm the instructor, I'm going to allow you to make a comment. And I used to say, you better make sure that you've got your facts right. It's not a bitching session and what we call an Irish Parliament. You've got to make sure your facts are right. And if they're not, I'm going to eat you alive. But so because this guy was the sergeant major, I'd say to him, so how are things going? How's life? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And no matter what the situation was, because sometimes it was, the weather was terrible, it was really cold, we haven't got a proper sleeping bag, I want to know, are the men suffering, and I needed something like a safety point of view. And he would just say, normalis. So I used to joke, they're going to drop an atom bomb on us today. What do you think? He'd go, normalis. I'm going to give you $1 million. What do you think? Normalis. And that was his one level. Was everything is normal, and I don't think he was mucking around with me. I think he honestly meant it, because in his mindset, he couldn't change anything. So it's just normal.
Yeah.
Normal, you know. And I think I sort of understood that then. No, maybe I didn't. I think I know I did. I know I did eventually, but I didn't understand it then, and I couldn't understand. So I knew that I was being genuine in asking and expecting an honest answer, and now I understand he actually was being honest in his own way. Which leads back to the comment you've made about that lifestyle, and I can, and it becomes about everyday survival.
Yeah, and then there's only like when you're living on top of it, or like you have just crashed on an airplane and you're in Andes or in Alps. The only thing what you figure out is, okay, what do we do today to survive today, and then you survive it. Oh, that's a new day. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So what do we do now? And eventually you get there by like the movie. Eventually, okay, we have been here for so long, and then someone has to bring in the hope. Someone has to be a salesman. Hey, actually, there is a way. There is a possibility. Now you can't step on people's toes, because in the Soviet time, if you were the guy, you will put to prison, because there's everywhere is a possible spy who will rat on you. So you had to keep it quiet. Because that was happened with my uncle, because during one of my father has a birthday in one of the restaurants here in Tartu, and during that time it was not allowed to, like, it was a Soviet time, it was not allowed to sing Estonian songs, right? And he started singing Estonian song, or at least somewhat, and then obviously in that crowd there was one dude who was a rat, or whoever he was, and eventually my father and his brother, they were not supposed to go to Afghanistan. They were like, my father was a sportsman, so he kind of spoke, and he got a good result based on his credentials, that okay, your sons will not send to Afghanistan, we will send them somewhere else in the Soviet army, but not there. But as he started singing, then one dude said to my grandfather that, hey, yes, your son is going to Afghanistan now because of this, which now creates another layer. Even if you have those dudes who have the hope, they have to be so brave to pretty much sacrifice themselves to open up their mouth. But now you have to find the critical mass of those people, and you have to wait for the right time, at the right timing, and then you may get free. But it's a long game, and you have to figure out not to step on the wrong toes.
There's two things I've got from what you just said, and what I think actually reminded me. First of all, it's why I consider moral courage one of the most important leadership qualities. And if moral courage is crushed, it means that even good leaders will just allow the status quo to continue, or bad things to happen, because if they fight it, they're just crushed. And I think this is, unfortunately, and I've said this recently to somebody, what's brilliant about Eastern Europe, and certainly here in Estonia, it's now the reverse of the way it was in the West. Because the values we brought here from the West, you've grasped. And I feel now in the West, and I see it more clearly, because when you're away and your freedoms are gradually eroded, you don't notice so much. Because I've got a clear memory of what life was like in UK, I'm going to say it, I can see things happening with free speech where if you say things which do not adhere to a governmental narrative, you can be arrested. And even if it's something which is unpalatable, you have to allow that freedom. Otherwise, people who say things which are correct in supporting freedom may also be arrested because it doesn't fit how your leaders wish to behave. And unfortunately, you know, governments are there are for the people. The people aren't there for the government to play with and just take taxes from. So I see a quite a unique shift. I call it flipping the coin, which is quite amazing, really. So moral courage, I think, I've always found in the military, if you select the right people, physical courage is not a problem. It's there, given.
No. Yeah.
Moral courage, not so sure. If I speak up, will it affect my promotion? If I speak up, will it make my boss unhappy? But I've always found that if you speak the truth and it's based on facts, in the end you're going to be okay. Unless you have a system which will crush it. Fortunately, I know certainly within the Royal Marines, they encouraged people to be honest, and so long as you did it correctly, you could say some quite naughty things. You could speak the truth to your superiors without fear. That's what I'm trying to say. And I often did, and it paid me back handsomely in the end. And it certainly was the platform that I used when I came to Estonia, because I know that I could have played that game of you're happy, I'm happy, and nothing. I wouldn't have achieved anything. So
I just needed to ask what's the definition of moral courage, and that's what I got. The simple definition is moral courage is the strength to do what you believe is right, even when it's hard or comes with consequences.
Yes.
And like the longer version here is moral courage is the ability to stand up for the right, ethical and just, even in the face of fear, opposition, shame or personal risk.
Yes.
It involves acting according to your values and principles, especially when doing so is difficult or unpopular.
Yeah, say no. I often see nowadays people saying things that if they had said 6 months before, it'd have been very unpopular and would have required maybe repercussions taken against them. But now, if the situation changes, they will now speak up. Well, it's too late. I mean, everybody's talking about this now. So that's not moral courage. That's just going with the wind, and that's not. There's no conviction there.
Yeah.
So the true test of moral courage is saying it when there's. Well, it's not correct. No, the thing is, I can say the same thing, which is correct, and everybody agrees with it, and I haven't got to show any courage there because there's no repercussion. But if I know I say something or do something which may attract attention, unfavourable attention on me, well, that does require, it requires what we call moral courage, because you can suffer something which is detrimental to you: loss of wages, loss of rank, loss of position, loss of face, ridicule.
That's something when I described, I heard one American consultant say it to people in a mid-level leadership position, like how do you kind of stand up for your team? And so when you go and speak with your leader, like once out of 10 times you will be heard. They will say, "Oh, that's brilliant, thank you for the feedback, it's awesome." Then 8 out of 10 you will get the head nod and nothing happens. No changes, no nothing. They just said, "Okay, thank you," but nothing changes. And then once out of 10 you will get fired. And that's what you need to accept if you want to be a good leader.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why you are here?
Just accept it.
You have to take that 10%.
Yeah, I accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you don't, then you're worthless.
Yeah.
You're not useful leader.
I mean, my only comeback is, well, fire me then.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
At least I'm standing up for my team.
I'm not changing my mind. So
Mm-hmm.
I often found, though, when you've got good leadership at all levels, you may say something which is not pleasant to hear, and maybe something they don't want to hear, but they actually go away and think about it, and they go, he's right, and you're going to get a lot of respect from that.
Mm-hmm.
And they like it. What I've also seen when you've got good leadership is people who just say the right thing because they think the boss wants to hear it, they actually are not looked upon favourably. If it's identified that he's just saying it not with conviction, but because he thinks it's what I want to hear. And I certainly know when you're in a leadership position, that's why I like feedback, and I don't mind critical feedback. And I would be wary of somebody we call it kissing arse. If someone just kissed my arse, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I have to be wary of that guy, because that doesn't. There's always something to say, rather than, oh yeah, brilliant, that was great. Oh, why?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Mm.
Why? And if there's nothing to add, just shut up. Yeah, it's fine. Great, cheers.
I agree.
So the fine line to that, but as I said, my simple golden rule was just speak the truth. Then that's the truth. Now, it's not my truth; it's the truth that I believe to be correct from making my evaluation of. But I'm also prepared to be corrected. But it's through argument, facts, and so if you stick to that, you're okay.
Yeah, I agree. So now, if we get to the section stuff, and I think it's a good way of getting in there. So pretty much, because what we just discussed is the dynamics of everything now, through doing those team exercises where actually you are also evaluating the individual skills just together with the team, which eventually will show you the standard and the level what the teams are, and then those exercises, what you just said, from ambushes to everything, it will kind of showcase all the dynamics of what a person has to be dealing with, and it's more like you just are trained to be a really great problem solver, and you are kind of prepared a certain standard, which eventually will make you at least capable in that realm. And as you go through all of those different iterations, you start understanding why things are the way they are, why it is important, the individual skills, why it is important in this scenario to have that, and that's why you kind of break it down and start from the individual skills. Now you get to the team level.
I think there's something, if we talk about leadership and from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to judge leadership, which is reacting to a problem and making a decision, in its essence, you've got to plan the exercise or task, which is fair to judge based on what they've been taught and the situation on the ground. So you also predetermine what, if we do this, what the outcome could be or should be given a certain set of actions, and you can then expect something similar or close to the reaction you've expected. So it's a computation from both sides, and this is often missed. So if I tell a squad to take on a company and they fail, and I say, well, you're a terrible leader because you failed, you'd have all died, well, it's pretty unfair, because you know what, if you send a squad to attack a battalion, I'm exaggerating, of course, but if you send a squad to attack a battalion position with 20 rounds each, well, what else do you expect? And you must be, you're a bad leader for telling your subordinates to do that task. So it's got to be fair and measured from both sides, and also that when you debrief people, you can give a correct analysis on what was happening on the ground, and they can see it and measure it themselves. And you can look at the ground, you can look where the enemy were, you can look what your task was, and when you explain what you could have done, what you should have done, they can go, I see that now. Because often what you explain is not fully understood until you actually practice it. And I know often I would explain things and demonstrate things, and they wouldn't believe me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd prove it by doing it on the ground, and then they would very quick, because when you can see things by doing, you grasp it a lot easier. There's something. It's not just words. I've seen it, and they can now measure it with their own mind. And I certainly found that pretty easy with the stone. It's very clever. But it has to be fair from your side when you teach it and practice it. That the problem they get is solvable with all the factors of how the enemy behave, and the level of training they've had. So of course, in your case, your level of training, you actually have to cross very hard terrain to attack the position, and that can be to your advantage, because the enemy do not expect you to be able to bid across that position without being given away, or it's not physically possible. And I know that the British commandos in the early days in particular, their method of attack was always to go the way which was least expected, because you can't do it. Well, we're going to do it.
Yeah, that's what we utilized many times.
And if you were good enough to do that, you can really take the enemy by surprise, because they just don't expect it.
Yeah, that's to me like another part of what I have been tried also talking, and I wonder how you guys did it. Is that one part is the drills, and the second part I need to teach the people how to think on a battlefield. And how I've explained it to them is that there are three kind of ways, and also I connect it together with the auto loop. But hear me out. That's the idea how I'm explaining it. So first, there's three phrases. Obviously, surprise is the number one that you need to get. Then it's obviously the speed, and then it's the violence of action, right? Those are the three things. Now, usually you want to keep your enemy surprised as much as possible. And if you go in there and you are compromised, you lost the surprise. Now you have to be as fast in your SOPs to get back the surprising. So you will get the enemy still again back to surprising, because you were faster. You outmoved them or outflanked them or whatever you did. So you get back the surprise. Now if you lose also the speed and you don't have surprise, you have to use all the violence you have to get out from there, to get back your speed, to get back your surprise. So that's the three things that you need to consider there when you're going to do an ambush or whatever you're doing as a squad leader. Okay, we just fucking lost the surprise. Now we have to go and start moving as fast as possible to even maybe get back that.
If I can just add something in there, that's why. Why, first of all, when you train people, it's got to be with the task you give them. The ground or the enemy they've got to take is doable. It's doable.
Yeah.
And there is a solution. There is a solution. So if they get it wrong, you can explain the ground and also the training that they were taught, and they can and it's not just saying it was bad or you should have done this. You can explain it on the ground, and they can grasp it, and it's fair. The key word also is it's fair. It's a fair debrief.
It's fair.
It's fair.
I agree.
Now, but there's the other component is a can-do attitude. Because if you're not trained properly and you haven't got the other component, which is high morale, and as Napoleon said, morale is 3 to 1 of the physical. Because you can have a large group of men with poor morale can be defeated by a smaller force because they give up easily. So when that small force punches, they might all run away. Good morale though comes with unit cohesion built upon excellent training. If you do what I call Pakazuha morale, yeah, built upon bullshit, well, as soon as you meet the enemy and realise that you don't know what you're doing, morale is absolutely, it will fall like a house of cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I stress that the can do because it is something that I can't give a lesson on can do. There's no such thing as a lesson on can do. But from day one when I joined up, the attitude was that you are given a task and you're going to do it. There's no excuses, you do it and you do it well. And there was never it was a harsh reality if you didn't achieve what you were told to do and you were punished. And it could just be a harsh verbal debrief.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important that there's the element of you should be able to do it with the training that's done.
Yep.
And it's sort of imbued upon you into your DNA where you don't give up. You do not give up. You don't say I cannot do. And I know within the Corps, if you were to say I can't do that, you'd be crushed. You'd just be crushed. And also it'd be a peer group pressure thing where you said it was just you just never said it. It didn't enter the thought process. So that actually you could say is a certain brainwashing. I don't know. It's a bit unfair.
Absolutely.
But
it's a mindset.
It's a mindset. It's a mindset. That's the best way to put it. It's a mindset.
I think it's a choice that person has to make.
And it's a choice that well, yeah, if I relate back now to training, which I never thought about, there's so many things I did in training now. And I say training because basically you're a civilian, and I wasn't even 18, and I was doing things. Okay, I'll tell you one example. So, when we're taught abseiling, now you've got all this super gear to abseil, and I'll tell you how we abseiled. We would.
What's the word abseiled?
Okay,
what does it mean?
When you go down a rope on a cliff.
Okay.
Yeah, when you the rope around you,
rappelling?
fast rope down a cliff, yeah.
All right.
Rappelling, I think you call it rappelling.
Yeah, rappelling, yeah.
Now, we would be given a piece of rope, and we'd be shown how to de-thread it, and then thread it back together. So you had a circular piece of rope.
Mm-hmm.
You would then twist the rope into what we call a figure of 8. And you step into that. You'd step into that figure of 8, and you get a D-ring, and you'd clip the D-ring into the centre of the figure 8, around the top of your inside of your legs.
Mm-hmm.
At the top of the cliff, they'd put the rope around your back, and they'd put it into the D-ring, and you take out a pair of your acrylic socks, which you were issued with, and you'll put your acrylic socks on your hands, and there's no, and you would then have to grab this thick rope and then abseil down the cliff. Now, if your hand slipped off that rope, you're dead.
Mm.
And I wanted to say, no, no, no. I was a 17-year-old, I was barely 17. And I had quite small hands, and this is a big fat rope.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking off, and you whoa. I hope that example works, because that's just one of the many thousands of things. You do it. I don't want to do it, but I can't say no.
Yeah, I get it.
Because
it's
I'm
the same like
Marine.
jumping out from airplane.
I can't say no. I can't say no.
Mm-hmm.
And other things you just don't want to do. And you know what? There could be the harshest form of discipline. When it comes to you could die if you make a mistake. You can, no, I'm not doing that. No.
Mm-hmm.
So I think training also gets out the mentally weak links by doing this as well.
I agree.
There's no.
I have another.
Go on.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So if I just use that as so there's many things with sublimely that I didn't understand, and maybe I don't even understand now, that you do, that you just take as normal. Although it's very dangerous, because you can't say no, because it's the way we do business. You know it's dangerous, and there's no alternative. You joined up for this, accept it, get on with it. There's no compromise. It's got to be done. And certainly in war, you're going to do many things you don't want to do it, and you just suck it up and do it.
Yep.
And
I think that's a very great attitude, and I have also a great example of what one senior dude, which most likely you have trained, but I will not name their name. But what he did is that there was one dude in our unit who I don't know, whatever his problem was, but he came in and he said it can't be done, whatever the random thing was that can't be done. So he told him, oh, hey, come here, let's sit behind my computer. He opened up YouTube, and he showed him a video of a rocket flying, igniting from a Earth and flying to the moon or to the cosmos, with people sitting inside. And then he said, see, this is the thing what humans can do. So what do you think? The problem you have, what do you think? Can it be done or no? No further comments. This dude stepped up and went and did it.
Yeah, exactly. It's can do. And you know what?
Yeah.
If you just do it, and if you fail, you're going to do it though.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, I mentioned my boss said I could just pick the phone up. I had every right, every moral judgment to say, boss, get me that ticket. I could not bring myself to say I failed. I didn't complete I couldn't do it. And I'm prepared to suffer anything rather than say I give up. And that is very important, because when I know I took that as absolutely normal way to behave.
Mm-hmm. And it's not.
It's not. And I started to learn that when the jigsaw pieces of other lives started to come together. And what was even worse, I later on found that there was an attitude of can't do. And it could be the simplest task. Can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it. And it was a lemming attitude approach of, I can't succeed, so I give up. There's no point in trying. And I did.
So
I did suffer that, and I couldn't believe it. I have to admit, it made me quite. It upset me a lot. Because it was.
You need a lot of moral courage to get over that shit. If everyone around you.
I had to because what I was doing required so much can do, and all I got back was can't do.
Yeah, exactly.
Which made my job even more harder to achieve, because I can do it, and I'm gonna make you do it because I know you can do it. Yeah, that was the thing is, you see, in my previous life, if you'd had that from a course, it'd be easy. You're gone. History, gone. And in many cases, if it was the same scenario, it'd be you're out of the army because you've got some badges on. You are not a leader. You cannot. And there'd be an inquiry. It'd be a massive. How did that person get on the course? Now, of course, these things in a correct system can't happen because there's been a filter. So if something does, if they can't achieve something on a course, it's for normal reasons. They're not capable. Not everybody's able to pass. Not like your course, for example, but they gave it their best effort. And if they give up, well, you know what? It was a 30 mile, 45 kilometre hard march with loads of kit. You've been awake all week. You tried your hardest. That's all we wanted. You're not able to do it, but you tried your hardest. Okay. If on day one you see that it's not for you, go. That's okay because this is a high level course, and that is an understandable situation. And the course is hard because we want to find out straight away that people haven't got the mental capability to get their heads around about doing something which you can do if you really, really want to. But you've got to want to, because to push yourself through certain barriers, you can only do it because the mind is forcing you, and that's where you can be very fit and give up.
I agree, and I think most of the our selection, the SEER school, where you are running on fumes, you haven't eaten in 4 days, and then you start, I don't know, evading from the enemy, which is 150 kilometers. You figure out how capable human is. It's ridiculous how far you can actually go. It's ridiculous.
Well, you can push yourself till you die if you.
Absolutely, and those are the dudes who are in those kind of units. That, I mean, they don't have the limit. They can push themselves until they die. I was one of them, but it's good to have that limit. But I mean, most of the people just have that threshold at 20%, and they can't push themselves towards 25.
And they're in a job that only requires that, so it's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
As we say, different strokes for different folks.
That's a good way of saying it. So I think one of the great ways of learning, and what I wanted to touch upon here as well, even though we are at 1700 almost, is like how did you do the debriefs? Because debriefs are pretty much the learning lesson, the place where you actually learn. That's the most essential part about the debriefing after we do something. So what was your method? How did you teach it?
Okay, well, first of all, you're very correct and right on that point. There's no point in doing something if there isn't a thorough debrief on what's just happened. But that's why the training has to be. You have to know what you've, or what, even if you haven't personally taught them, you know what they've done these subjects, so they are able to do this. It's not no, they're at this stage, they can do this. This was their task. What do we expect them to do with this training? And the task was a fair judgment of what they've been trained, because it's even if it's just a practice, it's to identify weaknesses, it's to identify strong points, weak points, things just that need to be brought up to the correct level, and that's why you need standards. And that's why the task has to be attainable within what they've been taught. Now, the way we do debriefs, and I actually spent more time doing debriefs in Estonia because there's normally a lot more to learn from it. There's so many points. So I found that the debrief could be 40 minutes for a 40-minute period that they did, because it ended up being like a teaching lesson. So the person given the debrief has to absolutely know his subject. The task that they were meant to achieve has to be fully understood, and they are capable given a certain set of circumstances. So it's fair, and that. When you come to debrief, you can explain what they should have done if they didn't do it, and they can recognise why they didn't do it. So what you've done is you've identified their weaknesses or something they may not have understood. You can now explain it again, and I also find because it is practice and it's something you can see, feel, touch and smell, they go, I'm beginning to understand now why you explain this, and if we don't do this, okay, I'll give you one example. People from the battle school, and I could blame myself for this, to be quite honest, because I introduced section battle drills. But because I couldn't do the progression, I only taught left or right flanking. Now, depending on how the enemy operate, depends on which tactic you use. And if you've got in-depth positions, like a further position, so if it's 2 positions, and I put in a flanking attack, or sorry, well, it could be a flanking attack from the position I've moved with a covering fire from here, or other way round. But if that group is now at a flank to another in-depth position, they are going to get cut to pieces. And I would explain this in a lecture and demonstration, and when it came to the day, they would still do a left or right flanking. Now, what I would tell them is that the way the enemy operate is they have been known to operate in depth. So what you may see on the initial contact, there may be more. And when I was doing this for the Iraq troop, it was because and Afghanistan, I knew that the enemy operated in depth. And I was trying to make them understand that if they do the textbook left or right flanking, they can put themselves into a very dangerous position where the cover group or the assault group, either or, can't support the other group if they come under a secondary contact. So actually, when I'm giving a lesson or a practice, I know that what do I want to happen, what do I also want to teach in this practice if they make the common mistakes. So I know that I wouldn't cut them to pieces for this. I'll just explain to them, look fellas, I explained this, and you can now clearly see that if you go into a left or right flanking attack, when there's a depth position, you are caught on the flank and you can't do this and you can't do that, and they'll all go, yeah, we get it now. But if you had done this, can you see how you could have actually defeated the second position? And they go, yeah, we understand this. Okay, we're now gonna do that again on a different position, and I would select a new commander. Well, that's progressive practice.
Yep.
So, but I went out that day, or before this, I'd planned the exercises to bring out training points, and then I was prepared to debrief on what they'd been taught, and then if they didn't do it, what would happen, so they learn from it. It's not guesswork, it's pre-planned. But if they do something which I don't anticipate, and I think it's successful, hey, great. But that's why the instructor, when they plan exercises, have to make sure that they're right. You have to know what you're doing. Now, if you don't, you go back to what I've described before with the old, okay, what do you think of what you just did? It was good. It was good. Yeah, I thought it was good. And both sides don't know what the hell they've just done. I'll bet you.
So how do you iterate that, and how do you now if the troops go to Afghanistan, if the groups go to, there's no instructor with them, how do you teach them to do internal debriefs where they only have their own information?
Well, yet again, this is normal everyday life, because the section commander and the men. If I have a contact in Iraq and it goes to shit, and it could be it goes to shit because you know what, it was a no-win situation. We were caught on our own. They had identified that we were isolated. It was a higher command fault. We'd been left isolated. We got attacked from 3 positions. But you know what? We did return fire quickly. We did retreat out of the dangerous space as quickly as we could use the fire manoeuvre. That was correct, but what did we get wrong? So it would be the section commander and the leadership who would debrief his section and troop back in base And it's the after action report, because there's always something to learn from it. Because you never get it, you never get it textbook right, and you're going to learn from it. And that's why also what I would always talk to the guys is that it's not only the leader, but everybody within that group has seen something with different perspectives. So the commander of that group, he should be asking them for it, like I would do from the group. So what did you think? What did you think you did? Okay, what did you think of what you just done? So really, I'm behaving the same way as if I was their section commander. But I talk to them as the group on debriefing training and say, okay, what do you think of what you just done? And of course, in the early days, oh, that was great. Oh, that was great. And I'd be, okay, I'm now going to, and then I would have to be the bad guy and say, well, it wasn't great. I'm now going to explain why.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the early days, when you're riding the horse or breaking the horse, they are very angry because they've never been confronted.
Read my letter, please.
Okay. Now.
Go without.
Okay.
But read my letter.
Okay. Okay. The wasp. Okay. Can you? Okay.
Yeah.
So.
You need to go?
Hold on a minute. I'll just be back
Yep.
in a second.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Right. We're good to go. Okay. Right. Okay.
Good to go.
Can you see me? I've lost you.
I can see
Okay,
you.
I've
All
got
good.
you back. Yeah. So,
Yep.
so, actually, what I'm also doing, without relying, well, what I'm also doing is teaching the section or the leadership of what they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm giving them the opportunity to tell me even what I did wrong.
Yeah.
In this
Yep.
case, what did I do wrong, or what did you see?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be from the real-time perspective. Well, I was there. You didn't tell me what to do. I had to make this decision. This guy was on my right. He didn't do what he should have done, etc. And the reasons why. And a lot of times, hopefully, you get away with it. You get away with it. Yeah, we could have died there. We were lucky motherfuckers. And that's why I say there's an element of luck and bad luck. Because you know what? You could have done supposedly the right thing, but you get taken out. So I think debriefs in training are absolutely important to teach. It's a great teaching tool. I think, but the debriefs have to be absolutely correct based on what they've been taught. And then the men will recognise clearly the mistakes they made, and also importantly, they accept the mistakes they've made. And then they know what to improve upon. They know what to improve upon. Otherwise, it's pointless. So, if I was when I joined up, some of the debriefs we would get in the old days would be, that was shit, and you then knew you were going to suffer. This is the old school way, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to self-analyse. Now, if you've been trained properly, you can sort of, we know we fucked up. We didn't do that. We didn't do this. But as I was taught as an instructor, that is not the correct way to debrief. You have to explain. You have to explain the bad points. You have to explain the good points. And it's always emphasised, no matter how bad, even if they do badly, there is something there they've done which was good.
Absolutely.
You then explain how they can become better by improving upon their weaknesses. And it is then your job as the instructor or the trainer to then go back out and then use good training to bring up so they practice and they get to the level that is expected of them. So it's actually a two-way street. It's a two-way street, and that's why.
I agree.
And that's why your trainers have to be so good. Otherwise, you don't go anywhere. You cannot improve. You can't improve. And you become stagnant at a certain level. You're just stagnant. And you'll never improve. And that's why I'm so ruthless talking about the way that instructors need to be trained to a high standard and soldiers need to be trained to a high standard, but it's not their fault if the trainers are only at a certain level of stagnation. You can't, both sides will get to a certain level, but they won't improve when they can, and that is something that every army needs to think about. Certainly in peacetime, stagnation does happen. I know what kept the Royal Marine sharp in particular was that we always went to environments which actually, even if you're not being shot at, if you make mistakes, you become injured.
Absolutely, like the Norwegian,
Norway.
Norway.
We worked with our pack in the mountains in -30, -40, and if you didn't have your shit together, you would die very quickly.
So you are working in an environment which will make you humble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that's what keeps you
When
sharp.
you get armies that fight in, let's say Russia, that did fight in Russia, and the Germans and the French. Well, before the enemy even attacked, they had that thing called General Winter, which normally kills more casualties than muskets and cannonade. So I thought that Norway, with its harsh conditions, actually really consolidated us as a group that every year worked together in such a harsh environment. It proved every year we're up to it. And I was also told once, so I'm not convinced of this, but I was told once that the British government were quite happy to, I don't believe this, but there's an element of truth in it, even if it's not true, that Northern Ireland was actually a great training ground. Because, you know, in my career, you were always bouncing in and out of a theatre of operations which was real. And if you got it wrong, you could have severe repercussions.
And I would say, like, if there will be a kind of a war here in Europe, which is a bigger scale, then Afghanistan just became a training ground.
Well, it was a training ground.
In the same scenario.
It was a training ground, and it's very important. But there's also another mistake that can be made, and that's living on your laurels. Do you understand that expression?
Absolutely.
And I think it's also a
comfort zone kills you eventually.
Yeah, because it's one thing that I'm so glad in the Corps. When I joined up, as I said, everybody had been to some confrontation. The regimental sergeant major, my first one, had been to Korea. The officer who passed me out of training had fought in World War II. Troop sergeant fought in many jungle wars. There were many guys who had 2 or 3 bars to their General Service Medal, which mean they'd been on 3 types of real operations, Aden, Borneo, those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But they never used that as a way to argue that we don't need to train today, or took it out on the younger generation because you've not been to war.
Yeah.
And I only say from my experience, I don't care if you've been to war or not been to war. I do actually. From a sort of respect point of view.
I get what you mean.
You know?
Yeah.
But from a but you know, if we come to train, we got to do it properly, and just saying what I've been in Afghanistan doesn't cut it. It's what you can do today. What you can do today is what's important. And that ruthless approach with what I was brought up with, I think is very healthy. when I first came out to Latvia, I said we had that Finnish guy, and all he talked about was the Winter War, and it was an anathema to me, because it's a bit like what we do today is irrelevant. My dad fought in World War II and he won World War II. Yeah, it doesn't. It just means nothing to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It means nothing to me. And yeah, that's another story. And I said he did one day say to me, "You've got to salute the Finnish flag." And I said to him, "I would never salute a flag which flew next to the Nazi swastika." And you know what military humour's like? Every time he tried to, every day we'd find a way to talk about that, and he'd get defensive, you know. Whereas if he just said, "Look, I know, because you know, I understand what happened. I understand why. And if he just explained it, we'd have stopped. But because he got so defensive, we knew it was a weakness. And you know what military humour's like. So he's shown a weakness. So every time we're going to say, "Oh yeah, but you were Nazis."
Yep, absolutely. I get the
you know,
what
it's
you
just
mean.
you know. Okay, so if we wrap it up now, I'll just say this though.
Yep.
I'm glad the way we've talked today about other things, because what I've been hoping is that my adventure has just been a sort of backbone or skeleton to be able to talk about other things.
I agree. I think today was the way how I think did a great job in terms of expanding on the topics, and to me it was very good.
Yeah, rather than just me just giving a monologue about I did this, I did that.
Yeah.
So I'm very pleased that I was able to expand, and I know Steve, one of my audience, my buddy, when he listens to it, he said, "Oh yeah, but I want to talk about this." Well, and I've said to him, "Steve, look, it might bounce around a bit, but I think it's important that we use this as a tool to talk about leadership and other things, because like I said, I don't wish it to be an autobiography. I want it to be just something we can use all the experiences that I saw to expand upon, which are, and we can, I've got no time limit, so we can make this 20 episodes. I don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. So I have three papers worth of notes, which are good ones because they are all related with leadership. They're all related with training people. So I really enjoyed today's episode. So we will book another one, and then we will continue.
Yeah, I'm really glad, Remo, and I was hoping it would turn out this way actually, because I wouldn't want to give a text. There's nothing that bores me more than a sort of textbook. Leadership is this, and you give us eight note points, and it's in one ear and out the other. But it is a good way that once you've explained it as a story, you can now look at those points and see, do they match what all the things you talked about? Then you can relate to those bullet points, like selflessness, because part of leadership, and it goes which is linked to moral courage, because if you're selfish, and I think there's nothing worse than a selfish leader. All his decisions are based upon what's good for him, and that's going to lead to a disaster.
Absolutely.
For example. Right, okay
I
then.
agree.
So until the next time.
All right. Take care,
Right,
Chris,
cheers then, Remo.
and we will speak soon.
Yep, and you, mate. All the best. Bye.
Bye bye.